Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. This is Collector Conversations. Part of the pleasure of doing my job is I get to meet incredible people with unique stories. And even when we're talking about the same watches, no two people have the same stories about the same watches. Today we've got a real original. He's a watch collector, an entrepreneur, and a former U.S. Navy SEAL. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Now, tell me your origin story. You're a superhero. I need to know where you came from.
Right.
How did you gain your passion for watches first?
So I was a child of the 80s. I think the first thing that anybody does is the swatches. So when I was a little kid, you know, for a birthday or Christmas, you get a swatch watch, and that was pretty cool. But after that, you know, it kind of grew, and I guess Catholicism, fake heroes, real heroes, kind of all combined, and I guess, you know, James Bond, and it all started with believing movies and those kind of things and thinking they were true. You see James Bond look at his watch, and that must do something more, and then in the movies it did. But I would, going to Catholic school, in the back of the room, we had these piles of National Geographic and probably Highlights magazine too, if you remember that one. But the National Geographic, they would let us, you know, peruse and read because that was educational, and those were, you know, vintage in their own way. They sat there for many years. From, you know, if this was in like the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of the copies were probably from the 70s, and you would see the ads for Rolex, and there were adventures and there were heroes, and it was Sir Edmund Hillary, and it was, you know, if you were a pilot, you know, flying the Concorde, you wear a GMT, and their marketing worked on me. And it was rooted in truth, but I grew up with that stuff, and it never left me, and I still, you know, I like to say that I like tool watches. Most all of, you know, the watches that I wear and collect are, and, you know, that's kind of where it started and never stopped.
There's a fascinating watch on the table, and it's actually here alongside the SEAL's warfare device,
right.
And these two things are linked. I actually graduated under very different circumstances with a Seamaster. Tell me the tale of this watch, because it's a standout.
So this is my first nice watch. So this was, you know, the era of the James Bond, the Pierce Brosnan in 95 in GoldenEye. So this is similar to that. This is the chronograph version of it. But when I was graduating from SQT SEAL qualification training with class 259. So BUDS and SQT is the culmination of it, and you get to graduate and you get to invite your whole family to that. And so my parents bought me this watch, and this is a gift. They have it engraved. My name is on it, and it's engraved BUDS SQT 259, my class. And so they gave it to me the night before I graduated. And so this watch I wore during graduation day. I have some pictures of it. And I always wear watches on my left hand. Like you know, that's how I do it. I think a lot of people do. But I chose that day to wear it on my right hand specifically. So when I saluted, that the admiral who pinned it, not this one, but a trident on my chest that day, would see that I have a cooler watch than he does. As an enlisted SEAL, I thought that was pretty cool.
No, it's good. And you've got the attitude too, so you had everything going.
I have a chip on my shoulder, and it's never going away. But I've held this watch, and I've worn it a lot. It's all scratched up. I've never got it refinished. You know, this was my first nice watch, and I loved it. I didn't really wear this. I would wear this for special occasions. Anytime I put my dress uniform, I would do that. When I would go out, I would wear it. But this was not necessarily a daily thing because I didn't want to damage it. But that kind of changed later in my career as things kind of came through, and I wore the Rolex as a beater watch eventually.
What was the graduation rate in your BUDS class?
Of people who started and made it through the whole way without rolling, it was under 10%. So I want to say that like we graduated with like 35, and of originals it was like 10 or 12, something like that, out of 300 and some odd starting people.
Now it's fascinating to me because you said that there was a culture of actual high-end watch ownership inside of the SEALs.
Right.
How did you kind of dip your toe into that, and then I guess you dove in afterwards? How did that start?
So I wanted to be a SEAL when I was a little kid, and kind of went on and off of it, but I read all the books and I believed that they were true. And the Vietnam era SEALs were known to wear blue jeans, they would wear tiger stripe tops, and they would wear Rolex and use bar machine guns. That was like the men with green faces in the books that I read, and the Dick Marcinko, the Vietnam era SEALs that like were heroes to me, and I thought it was really cool, and I read all the books. And a Rolex wearing SEAL was a thing, and because they were issued for a while. And if they weren't issued, you would get them at the post exchange. You'd go buy them for yourself because that was the reliable, good watch, and it was diveable, and SEALs dive. So the culture of that has gone on kind of forever, and that's never really gone away. And I would, eventually they started issuing Tudor subs. And so that was for an era. And then, you know, the watch of today is really the Casio G-Shock is the first watch you get issued. So.
And that's an issued example.
This is the one that I got during SQT. I think when you graduate buds, you get it. They give you your first issue. You're good enough to get like the full kit, as opposed, you know, we're going to spend money on you because you've made it through whatever. I think maybe in third phase they give you like better equipment because you're dealing with like Vietnam era stuff initially. And only the class leader and the leading petty officer get to wear a watch. So out of 300 people, 2 people got to wear a watch. And you couldn't really wear G-Shocks. You'd wear like Iron Men. And I grew up with Iron Men and Timex and stuff, and I wore those as well. But this watch was really significant. That this was earned. This is, you know, whatever, a $50 watch. But this one I earned, and I wore it, you know, a lot of my career. This was like a signifier, and I was jealous of owning this watch. Yeah.
It was like a mark of accomplishment. You knew what it took to get that watch, so it meant that much more.
Absolutely, it was earned and it was silly. And you know, if you saw people in town, you could kind of judge who they were on what was on their wrist. It's like, would a SEAL wear that? Is that a thing? And you know, that's this is the original one. I've destroyed many Casio G-Shocks, but this one will always be special to me. I'll always keep it, and it was earned.
You're probably the only person I've ever met who's killed multiple G-Shocks without some sort of a dryer or a car tire.
Yeah, so one of the things that we would do is the illuminator is too bright, and so we would put red brake light under it, so because underwater it can surrender your position. So you'd peel that up, and they put like spacers in them, and you would use attack boards when you dove. So you would dive with a wrist on or a watch on your hand and one on a piece of plastic. You'd have a compass and a Casio G-Shock attached to it, and when you're diving underwater, you're dead reckoning. So you're going in a distance for time, and so you're just that's how you navigate underwater when you can't see 5 feet in front of you. So you plan your dive and you dive your plan, and so you would have these on attack boards and you would crush those, and having that second extra G-Shock on that attack board would get beat up for some reason. I broke a number of G-Shocks that way. You're not supposed to be able to break them, but team guys will figure out a way.
Now, it's fun to me because you had some stories about old-timers who really did have experience stretching back to that era when you idolized people in the military. And you were telling me a story about one of your first chiefs and his experience with Tudor watches, and this kind of broke my heart, and a little bit more, actually.
I think it still breaks my heart to this day. So the Tudor watches that were issued for a while, when I checked in the team, you know, I was already wearing nice watches. I was really into it. I enjoyed it. And when anybody wore something different, I would ask them why they wore it. Hey, where'd you get that? Why do you wear it? And so I joined. I probably checked in 2007. So it was pretty far removed from whenever they issued that stuff. And so I asked a chief who had been in for about 25 years, you know, he's at the end of his career. It's like, did they ever issue a Rolex? And he said, no, that's ridiculous. He's like, but when I was a new guy, right around the Gulf War, they did issue Tudors. And he's like, but I was so new that like they were on their way out, and they wanted me to destroy all of the Tudor Snowflake subs. And they said if I didn't do it like that, I was going to get in huge trouble. And back then, huge trouble was like physically probably getting beat up. Like you're going to listen to your directions. And he had to go to the beach, and he said he took a group of Tudor Snowflake subs, mil-spec subs, took a hammer and bashed them until they were destroyed and threw them in the garbage.
Let that sink in for a few moments.
I'd love to have one. I'd love to get into vintage and pick some of those up, but they were intentionally destroyed. For what reason, I don't know, but that's the military.
That's a common story. You'll find that thread runs throughout history. Every military you should watch, someone's got a story of the day that they were all busted up, rolled into a can, or thrown overboard. But you created some new watch traditions in your military career, and a particularly pointed one is this Deepsea. That wasn't your original choice, was it?
No, I think that you're supposed to get a Submariner. That is the thing, right? That's the one that you get.
And that was when you started in the SEALs.
Yeah, so you would go to the reunions and you'd see what the old timers wear, the guys who'd been there, done that, the Vietnam guys, the UDT, which is the precursor. Submariners worn at those reunions is pretty ubiquitous. I mean, that is the number one watch. They're the people, I think that when other people buy a Submariner, and the history and the prestige of it and where it comes from, the SEAL teams is a strong place of it. And it's very real. And people wear it and they're very proud of it, and they engrave them and they have small tridents put on them and they look really cool. So I'm gonna get a Sub. But knowing that I had been issued a Casio G-Shock and other watches that were along the way were, Suntos and whatever it is, these are really big watches, and I got used to it. And I put the Sub on my hand, and it actually felt dainty. And I actually walked out of the Reed's Jewelers in the Lynn Haven Mall with the Submariner on for a day, and I actually went back the next day, and I had it was time to get the Deepsea, just because I viewed it as more robust, and it weighs a lot, but it really feels to me about the same size. Like these are, to me, knowing that like one is replacing the other in terms of physical size, to me those were the same. And so that was actually on my third deployment. Right before it, I got a re-enlistment bonus. And I was enlisted in the Navy, and I couldn't afford nice watches. And so on deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, I used to browse, Rolex's website. I used to follow Baselworld overseas. When I had internet, you'd use Skype to talk to your families, and I looked at watches. And I dreamed of buying a Rolex for many years, and by the time that I could finally afford it with a re-enlistment bonus, I said that I was just going to wear it. I was going to do my entire job with a Rolex on my wrist, and I did. So for at least 2 years of being a SEAL, I took this watch. I went skydiving with it. I went scuba diving with it. I got into real gunfights with it. I've been through tragedies with this. That was my daily watch for about 10 years. I got married in that watch. So I have 4 kids. All 4 kids, when they were born, I wore this watch. I won't polish it. I just had it serviced. I broke pieces off. I broke the pip, but that's that kind of got me into more watches. But this is I like the tool watch thing. I would carry a compass and a GPS on me.
And you've actually got a compass.
Yeah. So these are really the compass and the GPS that I would carry with me in Afghanistan. This is a backup. So I was a sniper, I was a breacher, I was a JTAC. So a JTAC is people who talk to airplanes. A sniper is self-explanatory, but a lot of times snipers are the point man. So I actually didn't pull out a compass. This is a backup. I would use a GPS, and I would use this GPS. So knowing that like watches have GPSs in them, I felt comfortable enough knowing that my watch is just going to be the tool that tells me the time, nothing else. And realistically, I kind of viewed both of these as backup tools anyway. The thing that you had to do is you had to prepare for the mission you were going and do a map study and look at the imagery. And you should have everything memorized as you're going through it. So yes, I would pull out the GPS when it was critical, but I actually didn't look at this very much. And so it gave me confidence as I became better at being a point man and a lead navigator to look at your GPS less, memorize it, picture what that world should look like, and then go through it. And they kind of became backups. The compass, any person who relies on something that's battery is waiting for failure. Murphy's gonna get you. So you always have this a Silver Ranger in your pocket. You always need it. And I would use the Rolex, and I would use it as a tool. And a little bit, it's a little precious. It's a little putting a square peg in a round hole. But I romanticize the thing. I grew up with my real heroes wore them. My fake heroes wore them, and I wore them.
And it's interesting too because you had the SEAL warfare device, which by the way is like a combination of everything awesome. You've got an anchor, a trident, a gun, and an eagle all in one place. But you also have it on the back of the Deepsea.
I did. So there's actually a watch dealer in Virginia Beach that I had to do this. So it's just laser engraved. In hindsight, because it was titanium on the back of this, I said I don't want to take the resistance. I don't want to damage that. The 12,000 whatever it is that I'll never ever no human can ever go. Although the new one is still cool and not really usable, I'd still own it. But I had this same device engraved in the back, and I know they have pictures of it. But it's something that's special to me that I know that it's mine. And honestly, part of the reason I did it is so that I would never be able to sell it. It would always be special to me. And I did that before I experienced, kind of all the triumphs and tragedies that I've gotten with this watch. But there are some diggers in here that I don't think you can get out without, at least laser welding or whatever.
Yeah, you've definitely got a couple of dents in there. Now take me on a little journey through your Rolex collection, because you have expanded to Tudor, you've got Omega, you've got Grand Seiko, but Rolex is still sort of the backbone of your luxury collection.
It's tough for me to get away, and a lot of them come from the same place of the heroes that wore them and why they wore them, and like my connection to that. And the Pepsi is one that I couldn't have wanted that watch anymore for as long as I did. And it literally started not with the Pan Am pilots, but as any child of the 80s would, with Magnum PI.
Yes.
So Magnum PI was supposed to be a SEAL. And it turns out that like this watch, a lot of the pilots in the military, I would say that I saw this watch in the military, the 5-digit version, which I'll probably go back and get that. But this watch is something that's pretty highly worn in the military by people who, kind of do cool jobs that I respected. And when this came out in the white gold version, I couldn't have wanted that. I don't even remember what year that was, but I followed it. And when this came out in stainless steel, I needed to own this one day. And unfortunately, when that first came out, I was not in a position to be able to own this watch. And it is really difficult to get. So this was a Watchbox purchase. So
well, thank you.
When I could finally afford to get it, I went to Watchbox and I could get a Pepsi. It was something that I've wanted since the 80s.
No, the hero worship thing is definitely real. I wanted my Omega Seamaster back in the day because I'm like, it's James Bond's watch, and as a young person, it makes such an impact, even when they are imaginary heroes.
Right.
Now you eventually did succumb to the Submariner.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how that finally happened, because the first time you wore a sub, you exchanged it.
Yeah, I did. So to me, we'll say this. I didn't say this in the beginning. I'm so thrilled to meet you in person, and during times when I don't feel great, I watch Tim Mosso videos and you reviewing stuff, and I find it calming, and I think that anybody who purchases a watch watches video on your 16-inch wrist, and if you like that watch, everything is for sale, contact Tim Mosso, yes.
Wow, repetition works.
Repetition absolutely works. And I have wanted the Hulk a really long time, and I'll tell a story on a really bad day of my life when I almost bought it, but I didn't. And there was a really bad helicopter crash that killed one of my mentors, and along with many, many friends. It was the worst day in the history of the SEAL teams with Extortion 17. And so I met one of my mentors in the SEAL teams. His name was John Foss at Sniper School. And he was already at SEAL Team 6. He was like a hero already coming in. It's usually you're more junior. And it was in 2011 that their helicopter was shot down, and it killed 31 Americans, and a lot of my friends. And he was mentoring me, and I knew everybody on it. And the day that occurred, I was in Crane, Indiana, going to the armorer school for naval special warfare, and I was basically by myself, and I had a really bad day. Somebody basically like babysat me. I got drunk in Bloomington, Indiana on Johnny Walker Blue Label, and I did the only thing that made sense to me, and I went into a watch store, super drunk and like depressed, and I almost bought that Hulk that day, but I didn't. I couldn't really afford it. I think it was $7,500 or something then, and they were going to sell it to me at a big discount because green was not desirable at the time. And I passed on it that day, and I really regretted it. And I was like, am I doing this for the right reasons? And when this one came out, the same kind of thing, I got this from Govberg. They sold it to me. And to some degree, where I was in my mental place, I look at watches when I'm not super happy. I find something about the movement, something about time, something about the repetition of it, the oscillation of everything. I find it calming. I don't know what it is, and it puts me in a happy place when I don't feel good. And on bad days, I look at it and I watch Tim Mosso video. Like I don't know, it's a thing. And so the green sub to me ties me to that for whatever reason in my head. It has nothing to do with that. The Submariner is the SEAL team watch. That's the thing. That's the heritage of the heroes that went before me. You have to own a sub. And the green one, I just think looks good.
I know exactly how you feel. I go to watches too, and it's the permanence of the watch that sometimes helps to re-anchor you and give you almost a point to rally, like when you're down, because that is part of the appeal of a watch. It's permanent, it's eternal, and the world isn't.
I mean, time is, maybe fake or make-believe, and how do we measure something that we don't even know how to hold? And it's a circle that's perpetual, and it doesn't make sense, and that's how we choose to do it. It's some kind of weird vibration that we get to hold with us and keep it, I guess. I don't know. But there's a romantic thing, and the Submariner to that is still to me. I love it, and the green one, that's how it holds a special place to me.
Now in time, you expanded your Omega family. You started with the Seamaster and you stayed with the Seamaster. I'm kind of curious, how did you triple up? Tell me a little bit about these.
So the Seamasters, to me, I love Omega watches and I'll never stop. I hold them in kind of the same way, and it's still, the James Bond. So this is actually the No Time to Die one. And I think what's really cool about it, it's titanium, it's the bracelet. The bracelet is really what did it for me. It reminds me of, I don't have any vintage watches. I'm just afraid of it. I beat stuff up. I will break it. And so the vintage, the faux, if you want to call it, I like the idea that it's new and it works and it does really well.
The Fotina that works.
Yeah. I'd like to think that this isn't Fotina, but sure. I use those words, but it's a vintage inspired, and then it's the broad arrow, and they developed watches for during World War II they used really the British watches, the Dirty Dozen, whatever it was, and I think that that's pretty cool, and it's fake on this watch, but Omega really did it. They were really used by service members. That's real, and yes, this is a movie prop or whatever it is, but I think it's enough for me that I like it, and I love Omega watches. I still love James Bond. I'm not going to...
No, it's good. You've got all of the James Bonds of your lifetime. In the sub, you've got Timothy Dalton, and the diver 300 meter, you've got Pierce Brosnan, and then there you go right there. You've got Daniel Craig.
Yeah, I love it, and Daniel Craig was Bond as I was going through training, and I'll never stop loving that. The green one, I never stop loving green watches. I don't know what it is. This one is special. This is a newer pickup, but they're fun. They just wear really well. The rubber strap feels still tooly to me, still fun.
And you can buy them. You can find them in dealers. They're available.
I actually ordered this one online. So this is hard to get, but I literally just went to the website, and I bought probably at 3 in the morning. I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw it, and I said, that must be mine.
Tell me a little bit more about some of these pure tool watches, your digital electronic collection. I know the story behind the G-Shock, or at least one of them, but you've got 4 more, and I'd love to know their stories.
So these are watches that I actually wore from high school and college, and that I was training with, and I was doing this is the watch I was training to be a SEAL in, and I would time my runs with. So it's a Timex tool watch. An expedition, who doesn't love Timex watches? I kind of grew up with this, and I used to time all my runs with this. So I'd go out, and it's not sophisticated. I have Apple watches, I have Garmin's, I have better tools now, but at the time, I thought that it was pretty sharp looking. It had an analog digital thing going on, a quartz watch. I thought it was pretty cool. It was probably $50 at the time. It had a bezel that I'm not sure does anything really for you on it, but I never used the bezel as I ran, but I would time on the digital. And this was the watch that I trained for to get ready to go to Buds, knowing that I had to be in great shape. I would go for runs in this all the time, and I've always enjoyed that. And then the same kind of thing. This predates a little bit more a Timex Ironman that I probably had in college. I'd go for runs with. This is my exercise watch during college, and actually in college I would wear a Fossil watch. At that time, that was that's all I could afford. That was pretty cool, but I looked for that one before I came here, but I couldn't find it. I have it somewhere. It rotted off the leather band that I have, but I still own it somewhere.
You're probably like me back in college swimming with leather bands.
Absolutely, I did whatever it was that there was to do with that. I didn't care or know that you probably shouldn't do that. But this Sunto is similar to a lot of probably very stereotypical of a lot of what special operations wear. This has a compass, an altimeter, a barometer. It does all of these things that I would say are a little bit more toolish. And then I have kind of the civilian use version of something like that, more modern, the Garmin Enduro 2 that is a computer, can do all this stuff. It's made of titanium. It has a flashlight built into it. This is really my exercise watch, but I love wearing all different types of watches, and I trade out all the time.
Now, once your career in the service was over, you went into the private sector, you went to Wharton, you became an entrepreneur. These days you're working on Zero Eyes, which is actually very veteran-friendly as a company. Tell me a little bit about that, and then we'll sort of segue to the watches you've collected recently.
Right, so Zero Eyes is a company that we're trying to be proactive about mass shootings, and it started after Parkland. We noticed that the shooter was on a camera for a few minutes before he ever pulled the trigger, and we said, isn't somebody looking at that? And nobody was, so we created a company that watches all your video cameras, and if a gun is exposed, we send out an alert, and we are trying to be proactive rather than reactive. A little story about me, I went to a middle school in Connecticut that was called Chalk Hill. It was renamed Sandy Hook Elementary School. I want to do something that matters in this world, and so we want to do something about mass shooting in any way that we can. We're based out of basically Conshohocken, which is about 15 minutes away. Very veteran focused. We started the company with about 7 people, and now we're up to 140 people, 85% of which are veterans right now.
And so this is done with a combination of human involvement, but also AI.
So AI looks for guns initially, and then we verify that with an operations center. So we built a talk of veterans that one is here in Conshohocken and the other one's in Hawaii. It's because you get transitioning veterans. We want to play a role to help veterans get job and find meeting and do something that we think makes a difference. And so we want to be that springboard to do better in this world, to do good and do well.
And so it's sort of it's got a mission on 2 different levels to try to help people transition from the military, but also to provide a service that clearly we need at this point.
Unfortunately, we need it. If I was doing, I'd rather be doing something else if that wasn't a problem in the United States, but it is. So I want to do something that we don't view ourselves as the only solution. We are one layer that can help. We want to be proactive rather than reactive. We want it to make sense. We want to do it without invading privacy. So it's just your existing video cameras. We're just processing that, looking for exposed guns.
And so now that you are out of the service, you're in the private sector, you're an entrepreneur, some of your watches are not so purely, shall we say, tool-oriented.
Right.
They're not necessarily the product of hero worship or utilitarian need. Tell me a little bit about the Sea-Dweller, because that stands out among your Rolex collection.
This is the newest watch box pickup. Yeah, this is the least like it. It's a Jubilee bracelet, which I said I wouldn't do, but I was really interested in it. I was looking to go up market a little bit and go for a little bit of the other brands, and it's really difficult to try on watches that are higher end or different boutiques that I can't go to a boutique and necessarily see an AP or a Patek watch. You can't even try them on. But if you have Watchbox, you can. So I go to Govberg, and they would actually let me try a bunch of watches on. And I was looking at other brands that I would like to get into, that I aspire to. And just to go away from Rolex was too much for me. I really just enjoy it so much. And the idea that this is their biggest complication, it's the first step into that next level, right? And it does the month. It has the GMT function. I think it's pretty cool. I'm trying to get into the Jubilee, and I actually really like it. maybe it feels a little bit more blingy and unlike me, and trying to get used to it.
Oh, well, you know, we grow as collectors, and
Still stainless steel, though, mostly.
well, there's a watch in here that is very unlike the others, and I'm not necessarily. Yep. Yeah, you guessed it.
Yeah.
You guessed it.
So I guess this goes to the history of it. So this is the Ed White. This isn't, you know, the run-of-the-mill Speedmaster, and it's just perfect. This is, I feel, at the higher end. I'm, you know, taking that first journey into the higher end. I think it's beautiful. I think it wears very differently. You know, supposedly it's, you know, more handmade, I guess, or at least hand-assembled by Omega, and it is more elegant, more refined than what I have. This is more my dress watch. I don't want to scratch this up the way that I'm unafraid to scratch others up. The tie to NASA is, I mean, undeniable. I mean, it's named after an astronaut. Actually, the SEAL teams used to recover the capsules. So it would be a SEAL who was in the ocean who recovered the astronauts in the capsules and would pull them out. So the UDT and the Frogmen did that. And so there's some kind of tie. 3 SEALs have now become astronauts. I don't know, and I think just the Omega that's a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more perfect. I can dip my toe into what that next level could look like going forward.
And you're starting to experience the world now of display casebacks.
Yeah, that, you know, it's I guess the Omega does that now too. The Seamasters.
The Seamasters made that step as well. But this is next
And
level.
I mean, this is, to me, is very beautiful, and I could put this up to, you know, some of the watches I got to try on. I think that for the value of what this is, even though compared to a regular Seamaster it isn't, but the bracelet is elegant and refined and beautiful, and you know, it's evocative to the American heroes who wore it, and really everybody else. But like that beginning of the right stuff of what it is, of what I would aspire to be, and that I see it through the watch. I mean, whether that's true or not, that's how I feel.
Well, reading those, you know, 1970s National Geographics, you would have been exposed to the late Apollo program. You would have seen that as a kid.
I mean, reading the books about it, seeing the movies, and whatever it is, and you know, any chance I get, I'm a little bit of a space geek. You know, I've met Buzz Aldrin, and like, because he talks and he's just incredible, and you see these heroes and the courage they had. They weren't sure they were coming home every time they went out, and I find that pretty cool. And this is a little bit of the history of that. It's just elegant and beautiful, and you know, maybe a step up into what that can look like.
And I guess Grand Seiko, how did that happen?
So Grand Seiko is something that I've always liked Seikos. I don't own any right now, but the you know, the dials are amazing, and I've always been into the Japanese culture, and I think it's amazing what they've been able to do in the samurai tradition. Since I was a little kid, reading about Miyamoto Musashi,
the Sword Saint,
the Book of the Five Rings. He was the greatest samurai warrior. He was 60-0 in his samurai battles, and it was about being a well-rounded person. It wasn't you couldn't be a great warrior if you were also not a great artist and a great thinker. And so that's something like the Japanese steel and swords. When I go to museums and they have actual katanas from Japan, like you go to the Met, New York, you see it. I'm inspired by that, and I think the hand that made those swords and those warriors and that honor-bound culture that is in science fiction and like that's in Star Wars is incredibly Japanese and pulled from that. That same thing is the reason that they say that, you know, all of their dials are made from, you know, in front of their factory and it's from nature. And maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think there's truth and beauty in that. This is also a little bit more out of, I put it on a leather strap. I don't necessarily love their bracelets, but that beauty and that precision and that attention to detail that the Japanese have is inspiring, and, you know, the Grand Seiko you gotta do.
That comes from a great craft tradition.
Absolutely.
Well, this is a fantastic watch, and I gotta say, actually, this looks good enough to be factory. I've never seen this model on a strap, so
It's a Grand Seiko strap.
Yeah, points for creativity, because that combination just works beautifully. And then I guess maybe you're sort of coming full circle now, going back to the future with Tudor. This one not to be smashed, I understand?
Right. So the reason I got a Tudor is I needed some kind of Tudor in my collection, right? So if I go vintage, the first vintage I'm going to get is going to be the 1655. I don't know what it is about that watch, but there's something really cool, but I'm afraid if I spent as much money as it is, I couldn't really wear it in the way that I want. The tradition of the Tudor, I because of the SEAL Team's connection, like I want to own Tudor. I've always wanted to own Tudor, so I took the opportunity on this for both kind of the respect of the 1655, and then just like the Tudor history of what it is. That I think if James Bond were really a guy going around, this is probably the watch that he would wear. It's elegant enough to go wear it out, but you can beat that up and feel good about it.
That's like the Kevin Bacon game. You've got a Tudor that looks like an Explorer 2, right, first generation, that you think would have been James Bond's real watch and is apocryphally associated with Steve McQueen.
Right.
So it touches everything.
Like, Steve McQueen never wore any of those, and he wore a sub.
But it's a fantastic watch, and you're absolutely right. Yeah. It's funny that these days, if you want the best Rolex historic reeditions, they all have Tudor on the dial.
Yeah, and I don't feel bad about it. I would say that most of my watches are not they're not Tim Mosso level watches. I don't feel bad about it. They're standard, They're entry-level Rolex. Are not that sophisticated, and they're not high horology, but I still love them.
Well, you're wearing a more Tim Mosso watch than I am. I've got my Garrick.
Right. So this is definitely totally in your honor. I got the Milgauss Z Blue, and it was from watching Tim Mosso videos. I watched it in 2007 at Basel World, I think when the first one came out, the reissue, whatever it was.
The first of the modern Milgauss.
The modern Milgauss, right. And I've always liked it, the scientist thing, whatever that means, I still kind of buy the same way that I still, your pilot of the Concorde should be wearing a GMT. For whatever it's worth, I like that, and I bought into it. And I was always interested in it, and I kept watching videos of you, like, if I were to own one Rolex, it would be this one. And so eventually this was also another a watch box pickup. And I think it's super fun. I really love it. And then they discontinued it, which is, I hope they come back with maybe an update of it, but on whatever the 60th anniversary. But
I would love to see a rotating bezel.
Yeah, the honeycomb.
Oh, and a honeycomb dial. You're really kind of like inflating my ego now. You've said you wanted to own watches that were worn by James Bond, Navy SEALs, astronauts, and a Tim Mosso favorite. I don't feel comfortable in that company.
It's absolutely, like, it brings me joy and pleasure to watch. And I reached out in hopes that you would say yes to me coming on.
It's been a lot of fun, and it continues. You've got the light side and the dark side of Rolex now with a modern day Explorer 2 that you can beat on.
Right.
And then a Daytona. And
right.
Are you a car guy at all?
So I am, and what I'll say is I don't own anything cool. I've driven cool stuff. I've gone to a bunch of car driving schools. I've gone to car stealing schools. I've gone to all of this stuff, but I can't afford the stuff that I'd like to drive. And so I live a little bit vicariously through Top Gear, and I've been watching that my whole life. And I would honestly say I'd live vicariously through you putting on your 16-centimeter wrists whatever these watches that are unaffordable, unobtainable for me. But I still get to experience it through that lens.
And I guess that driving dream happened with the Daytona.
The Daytona is I kind of guess I guess that's my favorite watch right now, which is I would have worn that. I wanted to go against that. I grew up actually living near where Paul Newman actually lived. My mom would drive by his house every day on the way to work in the early 90s. And so there was always rumors of him like doing awesome things. Like, did you see Paul Newman at the hot dog place? There's this like Martha Stewart. People would always say they saw, and she lived in Westport at the time before she got arrested. But the Paul Newman, like, I had a flat tire and Paul Newman helped me change it, and whatever it was all fake. I've always liked the watch. I think that in college I saw a picture of him wearing it on his wrist, and I saw that, and like I wanted to own, when I bought Fossil watches, the Daytona, and I wanted to put it on a leather Bund strap. I thought that was pretty cool, and I didn't get a Daytona until fairly recently. Thank you, GovBird. That's awesome. I think that my dream watch would be a Daytona. A Paul Newman Daytona.
So that's the Grail watch. That was going to be the next question.
I don't know if there is a Grail. I don't think there's any such thing, but that's That's pretty good. And then I talked about this, the Patek 5326 is something that seems to scratch an itch. If I get to go up to that next level, that's where I would go.
Yeah, where you've got pilot watch, dual time, and annual calendar all in one.
And in addition to that, I still think it has a little bit of, if it's too shiny, too gold, none of my watches are gold. I don't like yellow gold. I don't want it to be as flashy. There's something about that watch that feels subdued and correct and proper. And then the number of it is the same number as the Navy SEAL enlisted code at the NAC, which is kind of like a weird insider baseball in the Navy. 5326 is what a SEAL is.
That is your designator as a SEAL, as an
Yeah.
enlisted SEAL.
Yeah.
Rob, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Time out, Tim out, Rob out. Thanks for logging on.